let me be absolutely clear on this. As Prime Minister of Canada, when we say something has to be done, and this is, by the way, not just us, not just the United States, our European friends, Arab allies, people throughout the world, when we recognize there is a threat like this that has to be done, and it involves our own interests, we do our part. We do not stand on the sidelines and watch. We do our part. That's always been how this country has handled its international responsibilities, and as long as I'm Prime Minister, that's what we will continue to do.
Some tough words there from the Prime Minister today on Canada's role in the international fight against ISIS. He made it clear that Canada will do more. And CBC News has learned that Cabinet will consider a deployment of CF-18s to support the U.S.-led airstrikes. Should Canada engage in a deeper military conflict, how much input should Parliament have on the plan? And is Canada trailing behind other countries in joining the fight? Joining me now in studio, James Bezan, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence, and Peter Julian, the NDP House Leader. Good to see you, gentlemen. Appreciate you being here. I'll start with you, Peter Julian. What will it take for the NDP to support sending the CF-18s into Iraq?
Well, what we've been saying all along is we need more clarity from this government. We've been asking questions over the last few weeks. A lot of those questions have remained unanswered. We've been saying that we're very concerned about mission creep, and we believe that there needs to be a debate in the House of Commons and a vote on sending our soldiers into a war zone, which is what the government is doing. And to date, we've been stonewalled by the government, refusing to have that open dialogue, to actually answering our questions, and to have that debate and that vote in Parliament.
So if airstrikes become part of our mission, because we know that this is going to be around the Cabinet table, at least that's what we're reporting next week, that this conversation about whether they get sent, for how long, what that might look like, does that constitute a combat mission? Does that then go into Parliament for a debate and for a vote?
Look, I haven't seen the contents of the letter, and but
you're talking about the American letter from the President,
and but we've also been clear that one is if this does change to a combat role and airstrikes would be considered airstrike or would be considered combat, then our practice as government, which we've employed going back to Afghanistan and Libya, is that there would be a confidence motion brought before the House for debate and a vote to ensure that Parliament is backing the government and the Canadian Armed Forces in its role in this terrible situation. You know, we have been clear that once the Prime Minister made his announcement on September 5th that we were going to deploy 69 Special Forces members from the Canadian Armed Forces in an advisory non-combat role. We have been providing a tactical airlift, providing over 583 tons of medical and humanitarian supplies to the area, and as well as military. And that has been going into northern Iraq, and we are definitely working very closely with the Kurdish Peshmerga and trying to stop this slaughter of innocent civilians, ethnic minorities, religious minorities by ISIL. This is a terrible terrorist regime, and we have to be involved. And sitting back and waiting for things to sort itself out is not an option, because this could come right to our own shores.
Well, Rosemary, we've never been saying sitting back. We've been saying the emphasis has to be on humanitarian aid. And the question really is, we've had Paul Dewar, foreign affairs critic, who's gone into northern Iraq. We've seen the devastation in communities, the refugees that are basically existing hand to mouth, and unless more food and more water is delivered into those zones, more people will die.
But James Bezan is saying that we're doing that work. The call now
partially,
to the world
but we're
seems
saying
to
we
be,
could do more. And the reality is, the question is, what is the Prime Minister actually offering? Because it was, I think, a bit disingenuous for the government to say, well, the United States are asking us to do something, when we now know, actually, and Tom Mulcair raised this today in question period, again without response, that it's actually the government offering. So where is the government going with this? What is this mission creep?
Does it matter, though, who's asking and who's offering? Doesn't it matter what we decide to do?
What it matters is where the government is going. We're seeing mission creep become a mission leap, and now we're still not getting the answers that we've been asking in the House of Commons. And so this is a matter of real concern, I think, amongst the public, and it's a question of showing respect to the Canadian public and to our military.
But here, and I'll get you to weigh in a second, James Bezan. How can the government possibly answer all of the questions that the NDP might have on this topic, given that nobody knows how long this is going to take? David Cameron today said this is going to take years. Nobody knows how this is going to unfold.
But what is the government's intention? They were offering something to the United States. What are they offering? We have been asking specific questions that are not questions that are designed to trap the government, but just to clarify what the mission is. And we haven't had the answers that we're looking for and that the Canadian public is looking for.
So if we get to a debate and a vote, and it seems that's probably where we're headed, is that all going to be spelled out more clearly for people so we understand what we're getting into?
Of course it will be. And you know, this has been an ongoing dialogue between Canada, our coalition partners, and the United States. It started back in August when President Obama started to form the coalition. He reached out to Canada in particular, as well as others, to say, okay, what can we do as a country? And so we've asked for clarity on that, and now we're considering what the request is. You know, we have never, as a country, sat on our hands or sat on the sidelines while horrific things have happened in the world, going back to World War I, World War II, the Korean War, Afghanistan, Bosnia. You know, we've always been there.
That's fine, but Canada has also made choices that are different than other nations, not getting involved in the war in Iraq, right?
But that was a different type of ballgame.
Agreed.
So now we're dealing with a terrorist organization, ISIL, who are murdering and slaughtering and raping innocent civilians just because they have a different ethnicity or religious belief than they do. And they are a threat here at home. We heard about potential bombings going on in Europe and in the United States just yesterday, and we know that type of terrorism can come to our shores, and we have to do what's
okay. I just want to
needed.
let the Liberal defense critic Joyce Murray, who's joining us by phone from Vancouver, who just called in there, join in there. Joyce Murray, how critical? Hi, thanks for joining us. How critical do you think it is to have a debate and a vote going forward if, in fact, CF-18s become part of the mission?
Extremely critical that we have a debate and a vote. And Rosemary, I think that this government is actually pedaling backwards in terms of the Canadian public being able to trust them on it, especially when the Prime Minister tells us that we're being asked to do more, and it turns out he's offering the U.S. government to do more. So having clarity, being trustworthy, really allowing or making sure that Parliament is involved with this is very important for the public to feel like they understand what's happening. Not only was the war in Iraq in the end, the decision that the Liberals made not to go in was very much the right decision. There was really untruths that were being promoted in the public by the U.S. president at that time that ended up creating a situation that I think the United States itself later regretted. So transparency, inclusion, honesty, trust are so important when there is the potential for Canadian lives to be lost. And I think the Prime Minister has lost ground on that front terribly.
Do you agree with that, James Bezan? I mean, Tom Mulcair today also said the Prime Minister was misleading Canadians.
Not at all. You know, our practice has been when we send troops into combat, we have a vote in those comments. That's been our government's practice. The previous Liberal government that Joyce is just referring to never had a single vote in every mission that we sent our troops out, whether it was into Afghanistan in 2002 or again in 2004. They never, ever once brought this in for
but
confidence
go back to what
motion.
Joyce Murray is actually saying
So we haven't
here.
misled at all. We have been telling Canada, we have been telling our parliamentarians, we have informed both the leaders of the opposition as well as their critics what our steps were and what we were doing, whether it was deploying 69 members of the Canadian Special Forces, whether we were sending over tactical heavy lift aircraft, and then we want to make sure that we
Peter Julian and then Joyce Murray.
Well, that's simply not true. There are questions that were asked by both Jack Harris and Paul Dewar a couple of weeks ago that remained unanswered. We've been raising the question in the House. We saw the result this week. Real stonewalling from the government. Not a lot of answers being given. And well, the reality is that this government has not been clear. The government has made an offer. We don't know what is in the offer, what the intentions of the offer is, but there's no doubt that the government is putting soldiers in a war zone. And for the government to be trying to backpedal and say somehow that's different than what our commitment was, I think is simply false. The commitment was to have a vote and a debate, and that's what needs to happen.
Joyce Murray.
Rosemary, I just want to confirm that the Liberals acknowledge that the Islamic State, that ISIL poses a huge risk to peoples in Iraq and Syria and the broader region. We have agreed to the limited non-combat role in Iraq, but we've been very clear that if there's any plan to change the nature or scope of the mission, we need to have a full debate in Parliament.
But Joyce Murray, do you support the idea overall? Even if you have the debate and the vote, do you support Canada getting involved in airstrikes now, as many other nations, including Britain, just today decided to do?
Well, I am not going to speculate, and we're not going to speculate, because it hasn't even been discussed yet. It took us weeks of asking information to even know how many Special Forces members were there. It took us 2 weeks before the government would level with Parliament and Liberal questions as to when did that 30-day period start. So it's simply not good enough to have this kind of, I mean, this is a serious issue of life and death, and in this, of all places, the Prime Minister has to be open and truthful and not be inflaming people with rhetoric while obfuscating what it is they actually are doing and what they're planning to do.
One last question to James Bezan, then I'm going to wrap it up. Is this going to happen next week? Or we are told that this will be considered next week. Should we expect the debate as soon as next week, given how quickly this has to unfold?
Well, this is unfolding quickly. I'm unsure of what the timeline is, but I can tell you that as soon as the Cabinet makes a decision on what steps we want to go forward, Parliament will be the first to know.
Okay, I'm going to end it there because James Bezan's got a plane to catch. James Bezan, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence, Peter Julian, the NDP House Leader, and Joyce Murray joining us by phone. She is the defence critic for the Liberal Party. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.